There is a type of tiredness that cannot be cured by rest. It is the tiredness of the soul in the midst of noise, the type of exhaustion that comes not from excessive tasks, but from disconnection from the essential. We live in an era where everything needs to be fast, visible, proven. But the soul does not thrive on haste. It needs silence. It needs listening. It needs a space where nothing else is required of it except that it be. And it is in this space that is frightening because it seems empty, that miracles begin, not as explosions, not as grand events, but as silent reconnections with a presence that has never left us. Napoleon Hill understood this profoundly. In his moments of crisis, when plans fell apart, when the numbers didn't add up, when doors seemed to be closing, he no longer sought strategies. He sought silence, because it was there, in this silence, that he accessed what he called the infinite mind. The modern world has trained us to resist silence. He taught us to confuse movement with progress, to confuse productivity with value. But there is a truth that noise cannot hide for long. What is real is only revealed in silence, because God does not compete with noise. He waits until everything that is not you falls silent. And when you finally stop, he speaks. W. Clement Stone, Hill's mentor and partner, used isolation as a strategic tool. Instead of looking for statistics, he listened to the invisible. Instead of following formulas, he sat in silence. Because he knew that the field of greatest decisions is not mental, it is spiritual. And it is only accessed when the mind gives up trying to solve everything and starts listening. The difference between being alone and being in solitude is vibrational. Emotional solitude imprisons. Spiritual solitude reveals. One is absence. The other is heightened presence. And this presence is where miracles germinate. The quantum field does not respond to noise. It responds to coherence, to surrender, to the silence that is not emptiness, but a portal, a silence where frequencies align, where the invisible becomes magnetically real. You may have avoided this silence out of fear, because deep down, you knew that it doesn't just soothe. It reveals. It reveals what needs to change, what needs to be healed, what needs to be let go of. But most importantly, it reveals who you already are. And when you tap into that presence within yourself, you are no longer alone. You are with God. And it is in that moment, exactly in that moment, that the miracle begins. The vibrational pain of trying to manifest in the midst of noise. Manifesting is not shouting at the universe. It is tuning into it. It is aligning yourself to the point where desire is no longer a request, but a state. But how can you maintain this state when your mind is constantly being crossed by notifications, pressures, distractions, and demands? The answer is simple, but disconcerting. It is not possible, because the magnetic field of the mind only aligns in coherence. And coherence does not flourish in chaos. We try to produce, resolve, move forward, but inside, we are fragmented. Our thoughts jump from one concern to another. Our attention is never complete. The body is in motion, but the soul is exhausted. And in this state, what we emit to the universe is not clear intention. It is interference. It is noise. And noise, vibrationally, does not manifest. It only echoes more of the same. Napoleon Hill warned about this even before the digital age. He observed how many people pursued goals with confused energy, how they insisted on acting without pause, planning without silence, desiring without presence. And when everything went wrong, they didn't realize that the problem wasn't the goal. It was the frequency from which it was being emitted. It was the internal noise disguised as external movement. Confusing productivity with presence is an invisible mistake, because being productive doesn't mean being aligned. It just means that something is being done. But what is being done without alignment doesn't flourish. It may even work for a while. It may even generate results, but it doesn't sustain itself, because it wasn't created from the field. It was pushed by fear, and fear, even camouflaged as action, vibrates scarcity. To manifest truthfully, you must first silence the noise. the noise of haste, the noise of comparison, the noise of guilt, because these noises are vibrational codes. And if you're trying to create with a scattered mind and a restless heart, the field doesn't respond. It only reflects this same disorder. And you get tired, and you doubt, and you start to think it's not possible. But it is possible, just not in the noise, not in the rush, not in urgency. It is possible in silence, in centering. The moment you stop trying to force the miracle and start listening to what it is trying to teach you. Because every miracle has a frequency, and this frequency never shouts, it whispers. And only those who learn to listen to this whisper manifest it with lightness, with truth, with presence. When the mind screams and the soul is silent, the moment when God enters. There comes a point in the journey when the mind is exhausted. It has tried to understand. It has tried to predict. It has tried to control. It has tried to make things happen. But somewhere along the way, it loses its way. It screams. It screams for direction. It screams for relief. It screams for answers. And in that scream, it doesn't realize that the soul is already silent, because while the mind struggles to resolve, the soul waits to receive. It is in this contrast between the mental noise and the serenity of the soul that the miracle finds its place. Not when the mind is overactive, but when it surrenders, when it lets go, when it finally admits, I don't know. That's when something opens up, because the field doesn't respond to effort. It responds to surrender, and true surrender only happens when the mind stops and the soul begins to speak. Napoleon Hill knew this point well. In his writings, he describes how, after restless nights, it was always in the calmest dawn that ideas would emerge, not because he thought more, but because he finally became still. And in that space that seems empty, there is a presence, a silent intelligence, a wisdom that does not impose itself, but that has always been there, waiting for the mind to give way. Neuroscience today confirms what Hill intuited: the so-called default mode of the mind, that state in which we are not trying to solve anything, just being, is the most creative, the most revealing, the most aligned with the field. It is in this state that frequencies like theta are activated, frequencies that open the doors of the subconscious, that connect intuition, that activate the invisible. God does not enter the noise. He is already present. But it is in the silence that you perceive him, not the silence of absence, but the silence of full presence, the one that happens when you no longer try to control and just feel. And in that feeling, something greater touches your field, something that cannot be explained, but that transforms, that realigns, that calms. When the mind screams, breathe. When it agitates, observe. And when it finally becomes silent, recognize. You are not alone. You never were. It was just too loud to notice. Now there is space, and it is in this space that the invisible begins to speak, low, soft, but with a force that no mind has ever been able to contain. Loneliness, or channel of revelation, the spiritual reinterpretation of silence. It is easy to confuse loneliness with emptiness. It is easy to believe that being alone is being disconnected. But there is a type of solitude that does not isolate. It reveals. A solitude that is not absence, but amplification. A space where the divine can finally be heard. Not because he speaks louder, but because, in silence, everything that is not him falls silent. The world is afraid of solitude because it removes distractions. It brings you back to yourself. It shows you what you have been avoiding seeing. And that, for many, is frightening. But for those who understand the spiritual value of silence, this space is not punishment. It is preparation. It is where the noise of the constructed identity fades away and the authentic sound of the soul emerges. Napoleon Hill understood that great insights did not come in moments of crowds, but in moments of solitude. He taught that being alone was the perfect condition to connect with the infinite mind, because in this stillness, the layers of the persona dissolve, the ego softens, the mind gives way, and the spirit finds passage. And when this happens, what seemed distant comes closer. What seemed complex becomes simpler. What seemed unattainable becomes natural. Solitude is the soil where intuition flourishes. It is not isolation, it is encounter. An encounter with parts of yourself that only reveal themselves when there is no one else around to impress, when there are no expectations to fulfill, when you can just be. And in that being, the field aligns, the vibration organizes, the frequency rises. Synchronicities do not arise in excess noise. They arise when the channel is clear, when the soul is available, when presence is real. And real presence only happens where the fear of solitude has been replaced by reverence for silence. Because silence in this state is not absence. It is full presence. It is God, not outside, but inside. Not waiting to be called, but waiting to be perceived. Emotional solitude contracts. Spiritual solitude expands. And this expansion is not immediately visible, but it changes everything. Because from there, you no longer manifest to fill voids. You manifest from fullness. And this completely changes the quality of what arrives. Because now, you are no longer asking to escape from pain. You are creating to express the truth, a truth that only silence has revealed, and that, therefore, is indestructible. Fatal error. Seeking manifestation while vibrating abandonment. There is a subtle trap on the path to manifestation, a trap that seems like a lofty intention, but vibrates deep scarcity. It is the paradox of desiring the new, while feeling emotionally rejected by life, of asking for abundance, while believing deep down that you have been forgotten, of affirming faith, while the field carries the silent pain of those who feel abandoned by God. This state of abandonment is not always conscious. It hides in phrases like, "Nothing works out for me. I always come last. I do everything right, and it still doesn't happen." And when these phrases become vibrations, they contaminate the field, because the universe does not respond to what you say. It responds to what you vibrate. And if you vibrate abandonment, the field returns absence, not out of malice, but out of harmony. Napoleon Hill said that true faith is not the one that calls for a miracle, but the one that sustains presence even in silence. Because those who are still trying to prove that they are worthy are emitting the frequency of those who feel excluded. And this exclusion, even disguised as spirituality, blocks. Because desire becomes supplication, and supplication, when born of pain, pushes away that which it seeks. Lack disguised as high intention is one of the most difficult vibrational codes to perceive, because it comes with beautiful language, with words of hope, with declarations of surrender. But behind it, there is fear, there is haste, there is an urgency that does not trust. And this urgency is felt, vibrated, rejected by the field. The path is not to nullify desire. It is to heal the frequency that rocks it. It is to recognize that wanting something should not be born from the pain of not having it, but from the peace of already being it. Because when desire comes from a place of fulfillment, it attracts. But when it comes to fill a hole, it only deepens the void. Therefore, before seeking what you want, look at what you feel. Heal the abandonment. Rediscover yourself with the certainty that you are already included. You are already seen. You are already part of the plan. And then, yes, desire, but wish with the vibration of someone who already knows that he is worthy, that he is complete, that he is a channel. Because at this frequency, manifestation stops being an effort and becomes a consequence. Natural, gentle, inevitable. The mind that begs does not manifest, it repels. There is an abysmal energetic difference between desiring clearly and begging desperately. Desire, when mature, vibrates with confidence. It is calm. It is direct. It knows it is on the right path and therefore does not need to prove itself. But begging vibrates with need, vibrates with urgency, vibrates with fear disguised as faith. And the field feels this and responds with silence, The mind that begs is trying to negotiate with the universe based on the feeling of unworthiness. It says, "Please, give it to me." But behind its back, it vibrates. "I don't have it. I am not. I can't do it." And this internal incoherence contaminates the field, because what attracts is not the spoken desire. It is the felt identity. And if your identity is still that of the one who begs, then life can only give you more situations that confirm this stance. Joe Dispenza talks about this precisely. He explains that when emotion is not aligned with thought, the field does not obey. You can say that you believe. You can repeat mantras. You can do your best. But if, deep down, your body vibrates scarcity, if your breathing vibrates fear, if your heart vibrates urgency, there is no way to express it. Because the field is coherent. It does not judge. It only reflects. Napoleon Hill also said, "Faith is the mental state that can be induced by repetition. But this repetition is not just of words. It is of emotion. It is of a vibrational state. It is of behavior that is consistent with what is desired." And those who live in a state of supplication are still saying that they depend, that they need, that they do not have. And this field, no matter how much it desires something new, is still stuck in the old cycle of scarcity. Therefore, the way out is not to ask for more. It is to trust more. It is not to cry out for help. It is to enter the silence of those who already know that they are being answered, even if they do not see it yet, even if they do not touch it yet. Because true prayer is not born of desperation. It is born of certainty, and this certainty does not need to prove anything. It only vibrates. It only sustains. It only is. And the being manifests because it does not need to beg. It has already understood that everything it sought outside was always being attracted from within. And now, in this new state, the universe no longer resists. It only responds, because finally, there is coherence. And where there is coherence, there is no effort, only flow, only alignment, only miracles. Why miracles don't happen when you try to force them? Anxiety disguised as intention creates a subtle tension in the field. It's like trying to plant a flower in soggy soil. No matter how fertile the seed, no matter how careful the hand, it won't bloom because too much water, just like too much effort, drowns it. And a miracle, like a flower, only grows in light soil, in soil that trusts in time, in soil that doesn't suffocate. When you try to force a miracle, you push it away, not because the universe is punishing you, but because your vibration is out of alignment. Trying to control the invisible is an unconscious declaration of distrust, and distrust creates noise. It creates resistance. It creates a magnetic field that repels the very thing you say you want to attract. Napoleon Hill called this the law of allowance, one of the most neglected, a silent but powerful law, because allowing is different from wishing. It's different from planning. Allowing is making space. It means not interrupting the process with anxious interventions. It means trusting to the point of not interfering, because those who allow know. Those who allow are already at peace. Anxiety, even when wrapped up in positive words, is felt in the field, and the field does not lie. It responds to emotional truth, not to declared intention. You can say you trust, but if your body is tense, if your heart is tight, if your mind is racing, then your real vibration is one of urgency, and urgency does not attract. It blocks. Allowing is letting go of the need for control without letting go of vision. It is maintaining focus without losing lightness. It is taking care of the process without attachments to time, because the miracle is not the result of effort. It is the result of surrender, and surrender is not giving up. It is vibrational maturity. It is the point where you understand that you are already in motion, even if your eyes do not yet see it. The flower does not open because someone forces it. It opens because the environment is conducive, because the earth sustains it, because time respects it, because the light touches it. And so it is with the miracle. It does not need to be forced. It needs to be nurtured, with silence, with presence. with trust. And when that happens, it comes, not as an answer, but as a consequence, from a field that has finally learned to allow. And because of that, it can now receive, fully, sweetly, inevitably. When everything stops, the invisible begins to operate. There is a point at which silence is no longer absence. It is language. A point at which the apparent emptiness is not abandonment. It is preparation. When everything stops, when external paths are closed, when rational solutions are exhausted, when there is nothing left to do, something begins to happen. But it happens where the eyes cannot see. It happens in the invisible. It happens in the field. It is in this state of suspension that the miracle is prepared. Because in truth, what we call pause, the universe calls realignment. Pause is not a failure. It is a space where codes are reordered, where the mind finally becomes quiet, where the soul takes control again. And in this space there is creation, subtle creation, deep creation, silent creation. Neuroscience calls this state default mode, a state in which, even without active focus, the brain is more creative, more intuitive, more connected with the subconscious. It is as if, when the control is released, the greater intelligence finds space to act. And this intelligence acts with precision. It aligns people, ideas, events, but it does not do so in noise. It does so in silence. Napoleon Hill observed that many of the most brilliant solutions came after moments of exhaustion of the logical mind. It was not in mental effort. It was in the subtle relinquishment of control. When he allowed the mind this space of not knowing, something new emerged. Because that is how the invisible operates. It does not invade. It waits for permission. And permission only comes with pause. This process is uncomfortable for the ego, because the ego wants action. It wants visible movement. It wants assurance. But the soul knows how to wait, because it knows that the invisible is not static. It is active. It is intelligent. It is always responding. But its response only translates into reality when there is space. So, if everything has stopped, if everything has slowed down, if the world seems too quiet, perhaps this is the sign that the field has begun to operate, that matter is being prepared, that the invisible is finally finding its way. And when this happens, the only thing to do is to maintain the frequency, to remain in the field, not with fear, but with reverence, because now the invisible has already begun, and the visible will not take long, because everything that is real is born first in silence. Then it blossoms where everyone can see it, but only those who stayed know where it really came from. Be careful. Noise is the perfect distraction from your revelation. We live surrounded by sounds, notifications, stimuli, and urgencies. Today's world is an orchestra of distractions, and often we call this progress. But behind this accelerated pace, there is an escape, a subtle escape, a constant attempt not to listen. Because if silence arrives, it reveals. And what it reveals is not always comfortable. That's why we run away. We disguise the escape as productivity, and noise becomes a hiding place. Noise, in fact, is the ego's most sophisticated hiding place, because it keeps us too busy to feel. The mind believes that if it keeps moving, it will be safe. But the soul, it only blossoms in pause. And this pause, today, is frightening, because truth lives in it. And truth, when it emerges, demands courage. Courage to see what is misaligned. Courage to change. Courage to stop. Napoleon Hill said that deep and silent concentration is the bridge between the mind and the invisible. But this concentration is not an effort. It is presence. A presence that can only be accessed when the noise stops. And stopping the noise does not mean going to live on top of a mountain. It means inhabiting your own mind with greater awareness. It means choosing moments of total silence so that the spirit can finally speak. The addiction to noise is emotional. It is the constant attempt to avoid the discomfort of being with yourself, of looking at what still hurts, at what has not yet healed, at what has not yet been accepted. But it is precisely in this look that revelation resides. And revelation is the beginning of the miracle, because no one manifests from illusion. They only manifest with truth. Noise is efficient in interrupting this process because it distracts. And while you are distracted, you are disconnected. And while you are disconnected, you are in vibrational noise. You are out of frequency. And the field does not respond outside of frequency. It just waits. It waits for you to come back. It waits for you to listen. Wait for you to stop. The soul does not compete with the mind. It only withdraws. And when the mind is exhausted, the soul returns. And in this return, anything can happen, because now you are available. You are whole. You are finally in silence. And in this silence, revelation arrives, not as noise, but as clarity, as certainty, as that which you have always sought, but could not find, because you were too distracted to notice. Now, no longer. Now you see. Now you hear. Now everything can begin. The forgotten practice of silent mental imagery. Before words, before techniques, before methods, there was the image, that which you hold within, without saying, without showing, without explaining, an internal image. Not just any image, but one that pulsates with emotion, that vibrates with clarity, that lives before it even exists. Napoleon Hill called this the silent mental imagery, and he knew it is more powerful than any affirmation repeated out loud, because it vibrates, and what vibrates creates. The mind does not distinguish what is experienced externally from what is deeply felt in imagination. And that is why the silent image is so powerful, because it is intimate, it is constant, it is real in the field, even before it is real in time. But in the world of noise, we forget this. We prefer noise. We prefer methods that give us a sense of control, and we exchange the depth of the image for the superficiality of repetition. But an emotionally charged image, visualized in a state of presence, has the power to alter your electromagnetic field. It has the power to attract situations, connections, and realities that correspond to what you already vibrate within. And there is no effort in this. There is coherence, because the true image is not manufactured. It is felt. It is born from the connection with what is yours, even before it is visible. Napoleon Hill said that the secret was to see so clearly that the world had no choice but to follow. But this clarity is not mental. It is vibrational. It is formed in silence. The moment you close your eyes, breathe, and enter this space where there are no requests, only presence. Presence with the image. Presence with the emotion. Presence with the reality that has not yet come, but already lives within. This practice requires surrender. It requires patience. It requires inner silence, because the noisy mind cannot sustain the image. It tries to control. It tries to correct. It tries to accelerate. But the silent mental image, it does not need to be forced. It just needs to be felt. And the more you feel it, the more it vibrates. And the more it vibrates, the more the field responds. It is in this state that the miracle begins. Not in speaking, but in feeling. Not in asking, but in sustaining. Not in doubt, but in the living image of a truth that, even if invisible, already is. And because it is, it has already begun. And because it has already begun, it no longer needs words. Only constancy, only silence, only you, totally present with what is already vibrating. And that is all. Hidden error, trying to vibrate faith without healing the inner guilt. There is a vibration that speaks louder than any declaration of faith. It is the vibration of guilt, the silent guilt, the one that hides behind positive affirmations, that camouflages itself in spiritual practices, that appears as subtle doubt, as hesitation, as self-judgment. And even when you say, "I trust," if this guilt still lives in your field, it imposes itself, it contaminates, it impedes, because guilt does not allow you to receive. It puts you in an unconscious state of unworthiness, a vibrational state in which you, even wanting the best, feel that you do not deserve it. And the universe feels this. It does not respond to your declared intention. It responds to your dominant vibration. And if guilt is stronger than faith, it wins. Napoleon Hill spoke about the importance of identity. He knew that what you believe yourself to be is what determines what you can manifest. And if your identity is still tied to an unforgiven past, to mistakes that have not been reinterpreted, to parts of yourself that you still hide, then you are vibrating the frequency of separation. And this separation pushes you away. True faith is not just believing in the invisible. It is feeling worthy of receiving it. And this is only possible when there is internal alignment. When the image you have of yourself is no longer sabotaged by voices from the past. When your story is accepted. When your pain is understood. When your journey is honored with everything it was. And when you finally allow yourself to start over without carrying the weight of yesterday. The technique is not in repeating it over and over. It is in healing. Healing the internal image. Healing inherited guilt. Healing self-abandonment. And this begins with truth. With the profound act of sitting with your story and embracing it. Because everything you reject within yourself vibrates. And everything that vibrates manifests. But when you embrace it, the frequency changes. The vibration is cleansed and the field aligns. And then faith is no longer an attempt. It becomes natural, coherent, and in that state, manifestation is no longer an effort. It is an extension of your new identity, a reconciled identity, whole, true, an identity that says, with its whole body, now I allow myself, and the universe responds with everything, because finally, there is nothing blocking you anymore. Not outside, not inside, only flow, only light, only truth. The secret behind the answers that only come in the dark. There are times when you do everything right. You practice, focus, visualize, pray, and still there is silence. No clear answer, no obvious sign, nothing to alleviate doubt, nothing to confirm the path. And this frustrates, scares, tires. But it is precisely in this dark space, where the mind no longer finds control, that the truest answers are born. Because darkness is not absence, it is maturation. Andrew Carnegie, Napoleon Hill's mentor, knew this. He would retreat in silence whenever he needed to make important decisions. He no longer sought data. He no longer consulted external voices. He would step away. He would become silent. Because he had understood, the most accurate answers do not come from excess information. They emerge from the field. When the mind finally stops searching. This dark is not the end. It is the interval, a space where the soul reorganizes itself, where the layers of noise dissolve, where what is false loses strength, and what is real begins to whisper. But the whisper can only be heard when you stop screaming for answers, when you accept not knowing, and in that not knowing, you find the deepest knowledge of all, feeling. Intuition is not born in a hurry. It springs up in the dark, in the space where you have no guarantees, where you don't see the next step, but you feel it. And when you begin to trust that feeling, the darkness ceases to be a threat. It becomes a portal to a new level of consciousness, a portal to a new type of guidance. Not the kind that comes from outside, but the kind that pulses silently from within. Napoleon Hill spoke of the infinite intelligence that is only accessed when the ego is silent, when the mind gets tired of trying to solve everything on its own, when there is space for the spirit to take over. And that space is dark, because it is invisible, because it is silent, but it is also fertile, deep, real. The answers that change your life do not scream. They come when you stop demanding, when you learn to trust the pause, when you understand that you are not being ignored, you are being prepared, because the dark is where the invisible organizes the visible, where what you seek is already being formed, slowly, silently, but inevitably, because now, finally, there is space, and where there is space, there is revelation. How dopamine addicts your spirituality. and blocks the miracle. There is a silent chemistry going on inside you, a dance of neurotransmitters that often defines not only how you feel, but what you can manifest. And among them, dopamine stands out. It is the neurotransmitter of search, of expectation, of reward. But it can also become the poison of presence. When your spirituality becomes dependent on dopamine, it disconnects from the miracle. Dopamine makes you want more signs, more confirmation, more evidence. And when there is none, the body feels withdrawal, the mind doubts, the heart is agitated, and you begin to confuse the absence of sensation with the absence of connection. But the spiritual field does not respond to peaks of euphoria. It responds to vibrational stability, to constancy, to silent surrender, not to quick pleasure, but to deep presence. Napoleon Hill spoke about the importance of emotion felt with truth, but this emotion cannot be reactivity. It needs to be coherence, and coherence is not a peak. It is a continuous line. It is a vibration that does not depend on stimulus. That does not need immediate confirmation, because it already is, it already sustains, it already lives what it does not yet see. When you get used to practicing spirituality, expecting a quick reward, you are training your field to be based on anxiety. And anxiety, even wrapped in mantras, continues to be a vibration of lack. You are not creating from abundance, but seeking spirituality as an escape. And everything that is an escape blocks. Patient waiting is not apathy. It is alchemy. It is the space where the ego quiets down, where the frequency settles, where the body adapts to the new vibrational reality. And this process at times does not give immediate pleasure, but it reorganizes, it cleans, it prepares. And when the field is clear, the miracle enters, not as a spike in dopamine, but as a state that no longer needs to prove anything, only sustain. So if you are no longer feeling like before, maybe that is not a problem. Maybe it is the beginning of vibrational maturity, of real spirituality, the kind that does not depend on emotion to exist, but that vibrates with such coherence that the universe surrenders, because now you are no longer looking for the miracle, you are already vibrating like it, and this vibration is irreversible. And where there is continuous coherence, the miracle has no choice. It comes, it flourishes, it remains. Why most people can't stand being alone with God for 10 minutes. Being alone is a test, but being silent before God is a mirror. And this mirror doesn't just show what's beautiful. It shows what has been ignored, what has been repressed, what has been forgotten. That's why so many avoid it. So many get busy. So many get distracted. Because silence, when true, confronts. And this confrontation is not judgment, it's revelation. Most people can't stand this encounter because in it there are no more characters. There are no more stories. There are no more masks. All that's left is you, raw, real, whole. And this wholeness is scary because the mind has learned to control everything, even spirituality. It prefers memorized prayers, safe techniques, quick promises. But God doesn't fit in with that. God waits in the silence. He waits where few have the courage to stay. Napoleon Hill understood that the greatest revelations arise when you're no longer trying to impress anyone, when the search is no longer for answers, but for presence. And in this presence, everything is revealed. The inner noise appears. The old voices return. The shame reappears. But also, something is healed, because only what is seen can be transformed. This experience is like looking into the mirror of the soul. At first, the reflection seems harsh. It shows everything you have hidden, even from yourself. But if you hold on, if you remain, the reflection changes. It begins to show what you really are, the divine spark, the vibrational being, the living presence of creation. And then, the fear passes. The pain is silenced, and you finally find yourself. Silence with God is not the absence of words. It is the fullness of presence. It is when prayer becomes breathing, when a request becomes surrender, when you no longer need to be answered, because you are already at peace. You are already in communion. You are already whole. That is why so few stay, because the path of truth has no shortcuts. But those who stay, those who endure this mirror, come back different. They come back real. They come back light, because they discovered that God is not outside. He is there, in that silence that seemed empty, but was sacred. And now they don't run away anymore, because they realized that silence was the miracle. It always was. The magnetic field of total surrender. When you let go without running away. True surrender is one of the most powerful and yet most misunderstood states of the spiritual journey. Many believe that surrender is giving up, that letting go is abdicating, that not resisting is not acting. But true surrender is not passive. It is vibrationally active. It is a silent decision to trust without losing presence, to let go without abandoning, to give up control without running away from the now. There is a subtle line between letting go out of trust and letting go out of fear, and the universe senses this difference. When you let go with awareness, your field emits a clear frequency, a vibration that says, "I trust because it is." But when you let go because you're tired, because you're frustrated, because you want to numb yourself, the frequency that is emitted is one of emotional surrender. And this frequency does not manifest. It only echoes more tiredness. Napoleon Hill understood that the turning point never happened in strength, but in the space where effort gave way to certainty, silent certainty, the one that doesn't need evidence, the one that doesn't seek guarantees, the one that simply sustains. Because surrender is not the absence of intention. It is detachment from time. It is commitment to the process, not to the immediate result. Keeping your vibration high in the presence of not knowing is one of the greatest acts of faith, because the ego wants logic. It wants maps, dates, guarantees. But the soul already knows. And when you align with this part of you that already knows, even without proof, the miracle begins to be woven. Because you are no longer trying to force the flower to bloom. You are taking care of the field. You are nourishing the root. You are becoming the fertile space where manifestation can finally flourish. Letting go without running away is continuing to be present. It is continuing to love. It is continuing to vibrate with real gratitude. Not because everything is as you wanted, but because you are already the one who can sustain what you asked for. And this attitude changes everything, because it transforms you into the point of stability where the invisible can rest. And when that happens, the miracle does not come as a visitor. It comes as a consequence. Natural, deep, permanent, because now there is scope, there is trust, there is total surrender. When the inner world aligns, the outer world has no choice. The outer world is a reflection, a faithful reflection of the world you sustain within. This is a spiritual truth that is as powerful as it is silent. And because it is silent, few realize it. Most people keep trying to change the outer world with force, with repetition, with strategy. But reality does not bend to effort. It molds itself to vibration. And vibration is born from internal alignment. When your inner world is at war, when there is incoherence between what you think, feel, and do, the field responds with confusion, because it is reading not your words, but your states. And the truest state always wins. Even if you say, "I want peace," if you live in turmoil, it is the turmoil that will be reflected, because the universe does not judge, it only responds. Neville Goddard taught that imagination, when impregnated with real emotion, creates. It does not create in the future, it creates now, because it alters the vibrational identity. It changes the being, and when the being changes, the having only follows. What you see outside begins to change, because you have already become, inside, someone who lives on a different frequency. It is inevitable. It is automatic. It is magnetic. Inner alignment does not require perfection. It requires truth. It requires courage to look inside and see what is out of alignment. It requires emotional honesty so as not to mask pain with forced positivity. Because when you align with what you truly feel, even if it is uncomfortable, you open space for healing. And all true healing is followed by manifestation. The external world has no choice in the face of an aligned internal field. It cannot resist coherence, because coherence creates a vortex, a center of spiritual gravity, a point of attraction so strong that everything around it begins to reorganize itself. People, situations, paths, resources, everything begins to revolve around your new frequency. And this is not magic, it is vibrational mechanics. So, stop fighting the world. Realign yourself. Reconcile your parts. Heal the disconnect between what you desire and what you sustain. And then, see how everything starts to move. See how the universe bends, not to your request, but to your state. Because now, you are no longer trying to convince. You are being. And what is, already creates, already manifests, already transforms everything from the inside out, forever. The metaphor of the seed in the dark. The miracle grows where no one sees it. Before it blooms, every seed faces darkness, a silent space where there is no recognition, no applause, no guarantees, only it surrounded by earth, by humidity, by waiting, and yet it grows. It breaks through. It aligns itself with life even before the world notices. Because the miracle does not begin in the light, it begins in the invisible. This metaphor is more than poetry. It is a spiritual map. The seed does not rush. It does not doubt the process. It does not demand signs. It simply surrenders. It feels the time. It honors the darkness. And it is this darkness, so avoided by us, that activates its power, that makes it open up from within, that teaches it that breaking through is not suffering. It is blooming in secret. Napoleon Hill understood the value of the invisible. He knew that the most powerful ideas are not born in the spotlight. They are born in solitude, in seclusion, in the space where the rational mind can no longer cope, and the spirit takes over. This is the soil of miracles, a soil where you seem to be standing still, but you are being prepared. The seed does not see the sun when it begins to grow, but it feels, it knows, it trusts, because even buried, it is still in tune with the sky. And this tune is everything, because the world may not even see what you are creating. It may even doubt, but if you feel, if you vibrate, if you remain silent, something is being born. Something is coming. Something has already begun. Creative solitude is this practice of germination. It is not isolation. It is incubation. It is when you consciously choose to leave the noise, not out of escape, but out of reverence, because you know that your field needs space to reorganize itself, to align itself, to blossom from the inside out. So, honor your time as a seed. Do not fight the darkness. It is not absence. It is a womb. It is a nest. It is a promise in its raw state. And when finally the flower breaks through the earth, you will know that it was never still. It was just becoming, just like you, just like the miracle, just like everything that is worth blooming, at the exact time, in the right timing, in perfect silence. Why the absence of visible signs is a powerful spiritual sign. When you move deeply into alignment with something greater, there comes a point where the silence intensifies. External signs disappear, confirmations cease, and everything feels empty. But this emptiness is not absence. It is transition, a sacred blind spot between what you were and what you are becoming. And precisely because it feels like nothing, it is everything. The mind, addicted to quick answers, panics in this space. It wants to see, it wants to hear, it wants proof that everything is working. But the spirit doesn't need that, because the spirit knows that the field is active even when the senses don't pick up on anything. It knows that the invisible is not inertia. It is silent action. It is intelligence in motion. Napoleon Hill lived for long periods without any external validation, no visible certainty, no applause. And it was in these spaces where there seemed to be no progress, that he was shaped to sustain the impact of what was to come, because the silence of the field is not the end. It is the vibrational preparation for something that, if it came before its time, would crush instead of bless. It is necessary to learn to respect the time of invisibility. It is like an incubator, a spiritual womb where your new version is being formed. And like every gestation process, it cannot be seen from the outside, but it can be felt from the inside. And whoever feels it, sustains it, even without seeing it, even without hearing it, even without understanding it. The absence of visible signs does not mean abandonment. It is the universe's trust that you can now move forward without crutches. It is the transition from dependent faith to embodied faith. The faith that no longer needs answers to move forward, because it has already become a state. It is already vibration. It is already presence. If you are at this point, where nothing confirms it anymore, where everything seems to be at a standstill, do not back down. You are being tuned. You are being tested not to prove something to the universe, but to prove to yourself that you already are, that you already know, that you already sustain. And it is at that very point, that point where the noise stops, where the signals fade, where the world goes silent, that the field aligns most strongly. Because now you no longer need proof. You have become the proof. You are the signal. And that changes everything, because the universe responds not to what you seek, but to what you already are, even in the dark, even in silence, especially in silence. Practical technique: 3 steps to activate the silent field of manifestation. There are times when there is no point in seeking new information. What is missing is not knowledge. It is attunement. It is vibrational grounding. It is a return to the inner center from where everything starts. And that is why, when the mind has tried everything, the soul asks for simplicity. It asks for presence. It asks for silent practice. Not to make things happen, but to allow what already is to reveal itself. Napoleon Hill knew the importance of combining intention with technique, not as a control, but as an instrument of alignment. And that is why practices like the one below are not formulas. They are vibrational rituals, invitations for you to reorganize your field. And remember that you are already a channel. You are already a creator. You are already a bridge between the invisible and the real. The first step is grounding breathing with heart focus. Sit in silence. Take a few deep breaths and bring your attention to the center of your chest. Imagine the air entering and leaving through your heart. This activates your heart coherence. This is the point where the mind begins to quiet down and the field harmonizes. In this space, there is no rush, only presence. The second stage is visualization without desire. Close your eyes and imagine not what you want, but how you feel when you are already living it. See the scene as if it were happening now, but without wanting to rush it. Just be there. Feel the peace, the lightness, the joy, without the need to convince the universe. Just vibrate. Just vibrate as if you have already arrived. The third stage is vibrational reinforcement without expectation. After visualization, bring this sensation into your body. Breathe with it. Walk with it. Cook with it. Live the day with this frequency, not as someone waiting for confirmation, but as someone who already is confirmation. Because the quickest miracle is the one that no longer needs to be proven. It only needs to be maintained. These 3 stages are not tasks. They are states. They are reminders that everything you seek is already seeking you. But for the encounter to happen, there needs to be sufficient silence in the field. There must be space. You must finally become the temple of manifestation. And in this temple, there is no rush, only reverence. Because now, you are not trying to create. You are sustaining the vibration of someone who already knows that everything that is true, silent, and felt is already on its way. And it will arrive with ease, with precision, in the perfect timing of the invisible, true story. How a failed mentor rebuilt his life after 8 months of silence. There was a time when he had it all: the recognition, the busy schedule, the promises of success. But somewhere along the way, the external noise became louder than his own truth. He began to drift away from himself. And, as happens to all who disconnect from their center, life responded with silence. Projects stopped, contacts drifted away, finances collapsed, and he was left alone. But this solitude was not a punishment. It was a call. It was a silent summons to return. And he answered, not by choice, but by exhaustion. And when he realized that everything he tried to do only worsened the feeling of being lost, he stopped. He turned everything off. For 8 months, he withdrew from almost everything that connected him to the external world. And there, in the absence of answers, he found a new beginning. There were no elaborate meditations. There were no great daily revelations. There was just silence. And in that silence, pain, fear, shame, but also memory. Memory of who he was before success. Memory of the connection that preceded any validation. Memory of the frequency he lost, trying to be what was expected of him. And by remembering, he reconnected. This process was not quick, but it was profound. Day after day, he wrote without knowing why. He breathed without expecting results. He walked aimlessly. He just allowed himself. He just listened. He just cleared the field. Until one day, without any plan, he was called for a conversation, an unexpected invitation, a new project. And from there, everything started to come back. But not like before, with more truth, with more lightness, with more soul. Today, this mentor lives in a new time, a time of peace that no longer depends on results, a time of purpose that no longer needs performance. He does not teach formulas, he shares presence. And his greatest lesson is simple. Silence heals. Silence aligns. Silence reveals. Because behind every collapse, there is always an invitation to return to the only frequency where the miracle is inevitable, that of being. And he returned, not because he was saved, but because finally he listened to himself. And when he listened, everything started again. This time, not for survival, but for coherence. Not to prove something, but to live, truthfully. And that, he says today with his eyes shining, was the true miracle, what began in the deepest silence. When God doesn't answer, maybe you're asking on the wrong frequency. It's not always what you say. It's not always how you ask. Sometimes it's the frequency you ask from that determines the answer that comes, or doesn't come. God, the field, the source, doesn't respond to words. He responds to states, to alignments, to presences. And if the question comes from fear, haste, guilt, or desperation, the answer doesn't come. Not because of punishment, but because of vibrational mismatch. It's like trying to tune into a radio station with the dial out of focus. The message is on the air, but you can't pick it up because your vibration is out of alignment. It's in noise. And noise doesn't listen. It only shouts. It only waits. It only demands. And demands don't create space. They close. And the universe, in order to manifest, needs space. It needs silence. It needs coherence. Napoleon Hill warned, "The mind connected to the infinite mind is the one that operates in a state of emotional calm and practical faith." Practical faith, not blind, not anxious, but embodied. And this faith is only sustained when the internal frequency corresponds to what is desired. It is not about repeating, "I trust." It is about vibrating this trust to the point where you no longer need to hear anything to know that you are being heard. The right question, asked from the wrong frequency, still blocks. Because communication with the divine is not linear. It is energetic. The format of the prayer does not matter. What matters is the vibration of the one praying. If your prayer comes from the fear of being ignored, it vibrates abandonment. If it comes from the rush to be answered, it vibrates neediness. And these vibrations, even if disguised as faith, are still noise. But when you change your internal state, when you clear the field, when you let go of the urgency and remain, the answer comes. And many times, it comes even before the question is verbalized, because the divine does not respond to what you say. It responds to what you become. And when you become presence, when you become trust, when you become gratitude before the miracle, you are already the answer. You are already in tune. And in that state, there is no longer any need to ask. There is only a silent feeling, an inner knowing that everything is in motion, that everything is being taken care of, that everything is already happening. Because now you are asking at the right frequency. And at that frequency, God not only answers, He whispers, He guides, He transforms, and He does it in the exact right time, in the most complete silence, with the precision that only the invisible knows, the blind spot where miracles have always begun. They never begin with light. They never arrive with fanfare. True miracles are born in the gaps, in the voids, in the moments when you think nothing else can happen. And it is there, exactly there, in the blind spot, that life turns, that the invisible manifests itself, that the impossible finds passage, because miracles are not made of magic. They are made of alignment, of silence, of an internal space where the frequency finally corresponds to what the soul already knew. Napoleon Hill repeated, as if he knew too much and was seldom heard, "The mind only connects to the infinite mind in a state of emotional calm and practical faith, but few apply it, because few can bear the silence necessary for this state to happen. Most still expect the answer to come from noise, from force, from insistence. But the miracle comes when there is space, and space only opens with vibrational surrender, with emotional serenity, with a faith that no longer struggles to believe, because it already is. Loneliness then ceases to be a punishment. It reveals itself as vibrational purification, a process in which everything that was not yours dissolves. Everything that was attachment falls away. Everything that was noise falls away. And what remains is you, naked of defenses, full of presence. And in this presence, God finds passage. Neville Goddard said that you become what you silently inhabit. And this is the truth that the world needs to remember the most. You do not attract what you shout. You attract what you sustain in silence. Because the universe responds to your internal state, to your predominant vibration. And when this vibration is of serenity, of surrender, of presence, what comes is not an answer. It is a new reality. Silence, then, is not a void of life. It is a tool of creation, a hidden code between what you release and what you receive. A space where the field organizes itself, where the soul aligns itself, where the miracle prepares itself. And when it comes, it does not shout. It arrives softly, precisely, exactly. And in that moment, everything changes. Not because you forced it, but because you held on, you trusted, you stayed. And in the silence where almost no one can stand to be, you remained. And because of that, the miracle recognized you, because you were already it, silently, completely, since always.